All right, hello and welcome. Today we are interviewing Chris, also known as Mito Poppy. I'm pleased to welcome Chris. He is a functional health coach specializing in gut health, blood work, and developing personalized protocols for overcoming chronic health disorders. He is also a fantastic writer and extremely knowledgeable about a wide array of esoteric health topics. Welcome to the show, Chris.
How we doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Very good, very good. Just got some sun in, so I'm all ready to rock and roll.
Awesome. Well, why don't you start by telling me a bit about your health journey? What got
Yeah.
you started, and why are you so passionate about health?
Yeah, so I would say that health has actually been intertwined into my entire life. From the second I was born, right after they put those little injections into me. I'm not going to say the word on here, but once they did that, I had a horrible autoimmune reaction, just an immune reaction in general. It left me with 40 plus life threatening food allergies, severe asthma, severe eczema. I got sick basically every day of my childhood. I had C. diff. My immune system is virtually just a train wreck from this. Now, luckily, now where we are today, I've gotten rid of about 35 of the allergies, and then the asthma completely cured, the eczema completely cured. So things have been excellent with that. But since I was a very young kid, obviously, I had to do breathing treatments before school, all of that stuff. So health has been a very big topic in my life. And I've been in and out of hospitals for most of my life. And yeah, I've been very overall acquainted in this area. So when I was young, it was always my big goal to help people with their own health outside of obviously helping my own health get better. So from a year, like basically a very young age, I wanted to be a doctor. And I did what I needed to in high school. I had great grades. Undergraduate, great grades. Took the MCAT even and studied for it and everything, which it isn't the easiest of exams, as a lot of
No.
pre-med people may know. So yeah, I did the undergrad. I did all like the clubs I had to start and all the extracurricular stuff. And like as I was studying for my MCAT, just out of nowhere, I started vomiting out stomach acid. And it was quite horrific. I was virtually bedridden for 2 months during this important time of my life. I had no energy whatsoever. It was quite difficult to even walk up a flight of stairs. I would stare at my computer, just get eye floaters everywhere. My gut was totally ruined. My immune system was totally ruined. My entire face was covered in this red rash that was quite bad. So my health basically was a train wreck. And they did like endoscopies on me, all this like all of like these invasive procedures. And basically I was just passed around from doctor to specialist to functional medicine doctor, even to functional medicine doctor, where I dropped thousands of dollars all to have no answer whatsoever. So there just honestly came a day where I was like, you know what? I know a lot about biochemistry, OChem, all this stuff. I'm just going to start learning and see what I can do, because at this point it's very evident to me that nobody's coming to save me. This system isn't set in place to help me out with these issues. So I just started researching one day, and I came across health Twitter. Grimhood was actually one of the first accounts that I found on health Twitter, and he kind of introduced me to the perspectives of understanding things through the lens of our light environment and our environment as a whole, our mitochondrial function, all that stuff. So shout out Grim, you got me on that rabbit hole in the beginning. Yeah, the past like 2 years, 2.5 years has been me basically growing and kind of evolving through the process of learning how to take care of certain issues. And I wouldn't have it any other way, honestly. I've learned a ton since then, and yeah, it's been excellent so far.
Wow. Wow, Chris. You have a very powerful story, man. And
I
I think
appreciate
it's,
that.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's indicative of, a lot of similar stories. I think yours is definitely more towards the extreme end. But like people who've been suffering from chronic health disorders, who don't quite have the resources, or they have the resources and they're trying to seek help from this traditional Western medical paradigm, but it's just not serving them. And I really appreciate what you shared about sort of taking the journey into your own hands. And that kind of leads into my next question. So if someone came to you and they're like, look, I only have time really to do three things for my health. What would those three things be? What advice would you give to someone who
Yeah,
asks you
yeah.
that?
Well, I'm gonna ask you now. In this situation, do they already have like an existing complex health issue, or are they like already pretty healthy to begin with? Because it could be a very different answer depending on if they have like a very complex issue that's very nuanced in comparison to just like the average person who might have like a few things going wrong with their health, but not quite like the world isn't turning over quite yet for them.
Okay, yeah, why don't we do two scenarios? The first scenario, someone is struggling with their gut health. They have digestive issues. Any food, like it seems like they are experiencing a lot of bloating, a lot of gas, and just general digestive discomfort. What would you say for someone who's experiencing those issues?
Yeah, in that situation, I get that question a lot. I would always start with, have you looked at your blood work? Have you looked at any data to suggest what could be going wrong with you? Because as you probably know, gut issues, they aren't just like one general thing in the gut. It could be a number of things. You could have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO. You could have bacterial overgrowths in other areas of the gut. Maybe you have low stomach acid. Maybe you have a candida overgrowth and it's screwing over your actual carbohydrate metabolism. Maybe you're just overweight and you have an issue like that. Like I get a lot of people and they'll ask me about their gut issues and I'll see that they're overweight and I'm like, you know that just being overweight in general and having this like excessive amount of body fat, that ruins everything else. So that would be like one of the first things to take care of in that context. But in general, with a lot of people, and this goes for a lot of people that I see online, they'll kind of just try to like do trial and error with their own gut issues. And I don't think it's a responsible way to take care of your problems. I think that like no matter what, you should be looking at blood chemistry and data and an overall combination of your symptoms. And from there, you're going Sherlock Holmes mode basically, and you're putting together different pieces, of data and looking over everything. And then from there, you can make a more informed decision. That's a major thing that I like to go off of. Yeah, there's certain supplements, but they're going to be good in different scenarios, in different contexts. So why not just give yourself the most data as possible to make the most informed decision that you possibly can?
Definitely. I definitely agree with that 100%. And I see this in my fitness coaching. Like when I'm coaching
Oh
dudes,
yeah.
the more data we have, the better we're able to determine the trajectory of their fitness. Like which direction are they
Oh yeah.
gonna go? What is their next lift gonna be? Are they gonna add weight, take weight off the bar? It all depends on the data. So I'm really glad that you hit that. But now let's talk about like generally. So if someone is like, I don't really have any issues, I want to be more healthy. Like I think that there's
Yeah.
some things that I can do that it's not necessarily optimal. What would be just the three things that you would tell someone that they can do to improve
Yeah.
their health?
Yeah, in that case, it's going to be you need to take care of your light environments and your magnetic environment. So I'll link that as one like answer choice. So get sunrise in, get sunset in, get midday sun in. Just get as much sunlight exposure as you can, even if it's in the shade, because you're still going to have certain frequencies of light and certain wavelengths that are going to be able to reflect off of the green stuff in nature and inevitably help you thrive at a cellular level. That'll be one of the first. And then not only that, but you got to watch out for EMFs. EMFs, aka electromagnetic fields, especially the non-native ones. I would argue it might just be the most pervasive toxin in the 21st century to our health. The most pervasive because you can't really escape it anywhere you go. Like whether it's your headphones, whether it's the fact that we're on computers doing this, whether if it's the fact that you have a Wi-Fi router in your house allowing this to all run, you can't really escape the EMFs. So just creating like a sleep sanctuary before you go to bed, like turning the Wi-Fi router off, having your phone on airplane mode when possible, um, not living by a bunch of 5G towers, switching their phone from 5G to LTE, putting it on airplane mode when you have it close to your body or in your pocket. Those are all going to be big things as well. But yeah, get the sunlight down, get the magnetic environment down. That can be one. The next one would be exercise. That is extremely important. Nobody has any reason, for the most part, not to be exercising unless obviously you're injured or you're not able to through some physical condition. But exercise is going to help nearly every system in the body do its thing productively. It is, when you think about like major health movers, exercise is very important in particular because it's so upstream of so many biological functions that we need to be happening in the body. So I would say weight train anywhere between 3 to 5 times a week, get 10,000 steps in every single day, do it outdoors, then you can hit two birds with one stone. And then, yeah, if you want to get into like running or any of that, that's another topic, but doing sprints outside can be helpful, that type of stuff. And then the third one would be nutrition. So obviously dial in your macros. I think that's pretty mainstream knowledge at this point. But more importantly, download an app like Chronometer and start tracking your micros and see, am I deficient in thiamine because I'm eating an animal-based diet that doesn't have it in it? Am I deficient in vitamin E? I know a lot of you don't have that one in. So just downloading something like Chronometer and seeing where you're deficient can be very, very helpful. And yeah, I would say those are the major things that you got to take care of.
Awesome.
Oh,
Thank you for that, man.
sorry about that. If you're not
Sleep?
sleeping well, which is very much so tied in with circadian biology and the EMFs, even exercise and nutrition impact it. But sleep is where your body decides that it's going to heal itself, basically. So please prioritize that. If you're not sleeping well, it is going to absolutely cook your hopes of healing properly.
Yeah, I think sleep is one of the easiest ones to overlook too. I mean, you did just almost overlook it in your list, but
Oh, yeah.
like I feel like naturally, I know it's important for you because you just emphasized it, but like for a lot of people, I feel like sleep is one of those things that people are just like, "Oh, I can function off 6 hours of sleep, no
Nope,
big deal."
probably not.
No,
Probably
no.
not.
Yeah. And I've realized that too myself, wanting to recover, wanting to take strength training seriously, you need sleep. It's absolutely vital for performance. It's absolutely vital for recovery.
Yeah, you can like if you look at someone's testosterone level, it can be impacted by like a very significant number just by having 6 hours of sleep compared to eight. If you're running off of 4 hours of sleep, your level of cognition is actually like pretty similar to someone that would be drunk, and you would be like in terms of driving a vehicle, you would be considered at a similar level of impairment. So,
Wow.
not prioritizing sleep is one of the worst things you can do. This is when your body is actually attempting to start healing its cells. And a lot of people, they'll have this habit of looking at their phone and scrolling at isolated blue light before they're going to bed. And it's telling your brain, hey, it's actually 12 in the afternoon. So that hurts your melatonin signaling. That hurts a bunch of other processes in the body. It skews your circadian rhythm. And then you wake up feeling like crap. So what do? You wake up and you start scrolling on your phone all day. And all of a sudden you have a big blue light problem and you become addicted to cortisol and stress.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a lot in that, and our sleep habits are very tied into
Yeah.
how we get reward and dopamine and
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah, and another thing is if you're obviously very accustomed to getting a dopamine hit in the evening, like if you smoke weed before bed every night, or you do something along those lines, or you play video games before you're about to go to sleep, your brain is going to become accustomed over time to getting that reward in the evening as well. So in particular, it can be pretty detrimental overall to your sleep quality and kind of what happens once you want to make that change and get off the weed or get off whatever's causing the dopamine issues. Your body might have like a longing for some sort of reward in the evening, which is a very interesting thing to take into account.
Yeah, the patterns that our brains display from learned behaviors is very fascinating. I'm very interested
Yeah,
in those sort of
very
psychological
interesting.
topics as well. But I wanted to ask you, what's one, like, the biggest piece of mainstream health advice that pisses you off the most and why?
Hmm. Probably when people will walk in there and they just start talking and yapping about this one diet that cured everything for them. Like I'm gonna pick on. I love you carnivores. I've done the carnivore diet a few times and it really helps in the beginning. But the reason you're sick and have all these gut issues, it's not the deficiency of a carnivore diet. It's the fact that you have a gut issue that's not resolved and you have yet to fix it. So when people come out there and they say that this one diet is a one size fits all solution for everyone, it really ticks me off. Or when you have, obviously, we're both in the holistic space, so we think very similar on things for the most part. But if you look at the mainstream space, they have this like little superiority complex where they'll call out everyone and say, nope, this is all pseudoscience, this is BS, and this can be traced all the way back to the Flexner Report in the early 1900s, where the agenda was set in place to prioritize allopathic medicine over anything holistic, basically, and kind of launch a massive marketing campaign on dismissing everything holistic to be snake oil. So yeah,
Can you
it's very
just clarify
unfortunate.
what's allopathic?
Allopathic medicine is the current branch of medicine that we mainly operate off of. We also have osteopathic medicine, which would be your DOs, but yeah, it's like your MD, DO, typical medicine that you see.
Okay, so that's sort of more of like the mainstream
Yep.
Western
Yep.
medical paradigm, and
Yeah.
then the alternative would be like holistic or
Holistic,
naturopathic.
functional, yeah, whatever you want to call it. I like to just say decentralized because if you think about like the centralized system, it all connects to one node at the end of the day. But decentralized, we have many different branches and movements. So there's several nodes that are obviously very important towards the overall structure of certain communities that we have.
I see, I see. I mean, with all these different decentralized networks of health, obviously there's a lot of information,
Yeah.
and sometimes I struggle personally to stay up to date with like all the stuff that I'm learning
Yeah.
about the food industry
Oh
and
yeah.
research and all this stuff. So I just ask, like, I want to ask you, how do you stay up to date with all the research, and how do you determine what's legitimate and what's not legitimate?
Yeah, so actually in college, I started a club because it was one of my pet peeves. People misinterpret research all the time. So I started a club dedicated to just dissecting studies and showing people how to properly read them. So I've had my skin in the game in that area for probably 4+ years now, just learning how to read research studies and the overall structure of them. I worked in a lab for a very long time, and I'm very acquainted with how to actually read academic research. So I'm very careful about that when I'm doing obvious reviews of the literature. But like kind of the way that I like to go about things is just let my curiosity guide me. Or like if I'm working with a client, for example, and I see something come up, like who knows, I might just go on a 3 hour rabbit hole researching this one topic. So it's very random, it's very sporadic, but at the same time, I still have like a little list in my notes of things that I want to continue to grow in and learn. And yeah, just certain topics overall, certain mechanisms, certain pathways. So it's a little bit sporadic, but a little bit organized at the same time. And yeah, I like to use PubMed for a lot of the research. That's one of my favorite decentralized databases.
Very cool, very cool. And do you look at who's funding the study or who the study's
Oh
funded
yeah,
by? Does that
yeah.
determine your like whether the study's legitimate or not in your eyes?
Yeah, I think it's important to look at the conflicts of interest. And something that might blow your mind is, would you care to take a guess of who created or who was like one of the major people involved with the peer review system that we have in research?
Was it like John Harvey Kellogg or something like that?
Ghislaine Maxwell's dad. So yeah, that is the guy that is very much so responsible for all of the conflicts of interest we see in the peer-reviewed literature nowadays. And I used to work in a lab in college, and I can tell you firsthand, it's quite difficult to achieve funding from organizations like the NIH, especially if you're trying to do things more holistic that aren't operating in the main framework of medicine. Why is that, you may ask? Because we have pharmaceutical companies that are based on these petroleum-based products that have a ton of money to put towards funding for, guess what? Their own products. So we have this entire system that's based around these pharmaceutical interventions, and not enough money, quite frankly, is being put towards the more holistic invention or interventions.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I did not know that
Yeah,
about who started
yeah,
the
it's
peer review
crazy.
system that we have. That's pretty wild.
It's crazy stuff, man.
Well, I wanted to bring it back to EMFs because I know you brought those up. But personally, what convinced you to take those seriously? Because I know that that is still kind of a somewhat contentious topic between like the mainstream and like the holistic side. But what personally was the moment where you were like,
Yeah.
man, this is a serious issue?
Yeah, so before I even answer that, can you guess which disease just randomly started out of the blue when EMFs, or the non-native ones, were implemented into society in the late 1800s?
Is it migraines?
Influenza. There is
Wow.
no known reported case of influenza before EMFs were a thing. And if you actually look at the different changes we have societally in disease metrics, they've all increased as other disease rates have increased. Now, we can't just single that to EMFs
Mhm.
alone, but if you look at certain research, particularly that of Dr. Henry, I think it's spelled L-A-I, Henry L-A-I, I can't pronounce the last name, Lai or something, but he's from the University of Washington, and he looked at over 2,500 studies. Over 90% of them showed oxidative stress. I think about 83% of them showed like reproductive issues. Um, 70 something percent showed neurological issues. And the list just goes on and on and on about the EMFs. But going back to conflicts of interests, most of the time when it was a study funded by some sort of company that had involvement with the technological industry, the study showed no negative effects. But every single time it was an independently researched study with no bias or conflict of interest, it showed quite detrimental effects from EMFs. So that's just like the beginning of the rabbit hole for you if you're interested in researching that further. But in terms of my journey and what got me caught on that, it was the fact that I had very bad mast cell issues. And basically what that means is you scratch me, I break out into hives. I go off an antihistamine, I break out into hives. I exist, I break out into hives. My immune system was just a total train wreck at the time. And I was doing a ton of research into this, and I found out that the actual frequency from a lot of EMFs, it activates mast cells, which is quite bad because then those release histamine, and then it causes this entire inflammatory response in the body and just makes the immune system a train wreck. So in terms of the mast cells, you can think of it like a bucket of water, right? You don't want that bucket to overflow. When you have too much histamine, though, that bucket keeps rising and keeps rising. So let's say it's allergy season, that bucket will rise a little bit more. Let's say you eat something that's like a high histamine food, the bucket will rise a little bit more. And you just see more of these things compiling up. And then once the bucket overflows, that's when you're cooked. That's when you're really screwed. And that's when all these horrible symptoms just come out of the blue, seemingly. So, yeah, that was one of the first things that got me involved in that. But yeah, I would say like it's been a lot more prevalent in the media ever since 5G came out, which is a very high bandwidth frequency. It's lower in wavelength, higher in frequency, so the overall intensity of it is going to be stronger. And yeah, it's been way more prevalent in the media, so I've been doing a lot of research in that area.
Very cool, very cool. So what would be like if people wanted to reduce their EMF exposure, what would be what can people do to protect themselves?
Yeah, so let's be honest, you're probably not going to be able to cut it out during the daytime.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
quite hard to do, but remember, EMFs, they follow something called the inverse square law. So basically the closer you are to your device, the more harm it will cause. So fellas, don't put that phone in your pocket by the boys. That's not a good idea. Even for you, like if you switch those headphones to a
Hmm.
more wired pair, it would be much better for the brain overall. But yeah, during the nighttime, some key things I do are I unplug a lot of the devices in my home. Like, there's no need to have like the air fryer plugged in at any time. There's no need to have like some random charger in unless it's charging something. So I leave all electronic devices out of my room. Um, what else do I do? I basically create like a sleep sanctuary where it doesn't have any electronic devices in it. I turn the Wi-Fi router off at night. I even unplug my TV because even though the TV isn't turned on, it's still generating an electric field. Because when you look at EMFs, there's an electric component and a magnetic component to it. When you plug something in the wall, that electric component comes to premonition. Now, when you turn the device on and the current is moving, that is when you create the magnetic components of it, and that's when the EMFs can have like really do most of their damage. So the best thing you can do is distance yourselves from common sources of EMFs when you sleep, but also do things during the daytime, like put your phone on airplane mode if possible, and if you're connected to Wi-Fi. That's going to be a really useful thing that you can do. Don't put your phone on your chest. Don't put your laptop on your chest. Don't live like right next to power lines if that's possible. Don't live by a bunch of 5G towers, and like ideally pick the suburbs over the city. That's going to be a way better bet for your health in the long run. Now that's not feasible, and it's not going to be possible for everyone. So at the end of the day, it should just be limit what you can and what's within your control.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, also, lots of grounding. Grounding is going to be very important.
And that, to just to clarify for people, is being barefoot on the earth. So having like a connected, just being
Yep.
straight up connected to the earth.
Yep. And a really cool thing is if you're standing in the ocean with your feet in the water grounded, it creates a natural Faraday cage around you, rendering you to be completely resistant to EMFs almost.
Wow, I didn't know that. I didn't
Yeah,
know
so
that. I'll
go to
have
the
to research
beach.
that more.
Please go to the beach. You will not regret it.
Yeah, well, I'm moving to Arizona, so there's not much beach
Nope.
around there.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Awesome, man. Let's move on to the best topic in the world is seed oils. I've seen you written about them a lot before, and so what's the most important thing people should know about seed oils?
Yeah, so there's a lot of arguments online, whatever. The bottom line is that if you are frying an oil that's relatively rancid at a high temperature, you are going to create oxidative byproducts that are going to damage your cells and they're going to make you sick over time. So it's just not a good idea to be eating these foods with these oils that are extremely rancid and low quality. Even olive oil, if it ends up becoming more rancid and low quality and oxidized, it's going to cause a lot of problems. It's going to release like chemical byproducts such as 4-HNE, 9,13-HODE. There's a lot of issues out there with that. So definitely watch out for those. Seed oils in particular are very prone to lipid peroxidation, which is just fancy jargon for saying it's a chemical reaction that makes the resulting byproducts more dangerous for our physiology. And make sure that you keep your omega 6 to 3 ratio in balance because the average American, they have an omega 6 to 3 ratio of 25 to 1. That is highly inflammatory for you and it is very bad. You want your omega 6 to 3 ratio to be between 1 to 1 and 4 to 1. Even the American Heart Association recommends this, like ironically enough. So keep it between there. You're going to do this by getting phenomenal sources of seafood in, like sardines, like salmon, like shellfish, all that stuff. Two of my favorite omega 3s to really go over and emphasize are DHA and ALA, and EPA is another really good one. But the big thing in the big like picture of things is you want to have a good DHA to arachidonic acid ratio. Arachidonic acid is an omega 6. DHA is a very essential omega 3. that is honestly attributed to the reason humans are as smart as they are. So emphasize that. Get your DHA from cold water fatty fish. It's going to be really important. And then do your best to go low omega 6 if you're in a position where you obviously have a very high amounts of omega 6 fatty acids.
Yeah, I think most people have heard of omega 3s, and that's kind of like general knowledge how important those are. But most people haven't heard of omega 6s because it's not talked about.
Yeah.
Um, Mainly because like these oils are in all of our foods,
Oh, yeah.
and people don't really seem to understand why they're bad. And I've heard different arguments as to why they're bad. One of them being the omega 6 to 3 ratio, another being just how processed they are. Like what you have to
Very
do to
refined. Yeah.
extract an oil from a seed
Oh, yeah.
is a really crazy process. There's a lot of chemical processes involved. So my sort of question is like, is it the actual ingredient itself that's bad, or is it the processing that's bad? Because the processing involves heating, bleaching, all this chemical stuff that
Yeah.
really messes with the end
Yeah.
product.
I think that the processing is pretty bad personally, unless it's like cold pressed, like you would do with olive oil, then it can be a little bit better. But when you're doing that crazy amount of processing, the oil is going to be very prone to becoming more rancid, especially like even if you take a study and you look at the oil before it's fried. I would imagine that once you do put it on the fryer, it's going to be way more resistant to or it's be way more prone to oxidation than a typical oil. So just remembering like the actual like is this oil going to oxidize? What's the quality of it? Is a really important process. And I'm just not a fan of frying a ton of stuff in general. I think it's better to like cook things at lower temperatures, all that type of stuff. But one thing that I really want to touch on in regards to the omega 6 to 3 ratio is that omega 6 fats are not objectively bad. Linoleic acid is not objectively bad. Arachidonic acid is not objectively bad. They all play an important role in human physiology, and a lot of our brain is actually made up of or it's one of the omega 6s. I don't want to misquote something, but yeah, a lot of our brain is made up of omega 6 polyunsaturated fatty acids. The key that everyone needs to take home is that you can't eat too much of these things. And since you're probably already have like basically since you already have too much of this in your system, it would be a favorable idea to make most of your fats come from omega 3s, saturated fats, and monounsaturated fats.
I personally just think fats like beef tallow, ghee, they taste better.
Way better. It's not even close. I like coconut oil a lot too.
Yeah, coconut oil is good. It's kind of like a lower temperature thing though.
Yeah, you gotta
I
you gotta
wanted
be
I
careful.
wanted to ask because obviously you have a lot of health practices that are
Yeah.
very important to you. How do you balance those with like enjoying life and social situations?
Yeah, so for me it's a little bit unique obviously because my allergies it's not like an intolerance. What happened with me was obviously the little jab injury when I was a baby. So that rendered me to be permanently allergic to things like dairy, peanuts, tree nuts, a bunch of legumes. So that's like my main issue. So I'm already very aware of asking for certain things when I go out and all that. And I like to call in advance so it's not too much of an inconvenience for people there. But yeah, I'm very adamant about that. And I usually just get my stuff cooked in tallow or olive oil. I just refrain from getting my food cooked in that crap. So that's just kind of how I am. That's how I've always been. I'll be very assertive about that. But if you're gonna go out and enjoy a meal for like one time, I don't think it's the biggest deal in the universe whatsoever. Now, with that being said, I think if you're going to want to be able to afford that meal, you should already be objectively healthy. So you should always already be a pretty healthy person because you can't really afford that as much when you're unhealthy and you're trying to heal from something. And you should have very good circadian biology. Basically just means that your circadian rhythm is in sync. You should like be exercising at normal times. You're getting sunlight. Your sleep is dialed in. Those types of things. So basically make up for all other aspects across the board so that it kind of balances it out. And that's if you are a relatively healthy person. I don't believe in obviously eating like very bad foods when you're in that sick state and you're trying to heal from something.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I think that the way most people view going out or treating themselves is it's just kind of their normal way of life. They
Yeah.
don't have this idea that, no, this is only reserved for special occasions. My normal day to day existence should embody health. Most people don't operate like that, and
Well,
it's
yeah,
clear. We
it's
can see in our
indoctrination.
society we're full of sick
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, because when you go to college, what is the first like little pun that they drop on you? Your parents, everyone. They say, "Oh, just wait until the freshman 15 comes." Like they're flexing that you're gonna get fat and gain 15 pounds from going to college, eating fried food and binge drinking. That's not normal.
It's not normal at all. I think sickness and disease is normalized in our society,
Yeah, it's
but
very
luckily
normalized.
that's changing with people like RFK now. There's a big movement around health and putting more awareness into our environment, the foods that we're eating, all of this stuff.
What percent of people do you think have a chronic disease in the US?
Isn't it like it's somewhere between 60 and 80%, right?
Yep, but somewhere between there, which
Yeah.
is like you want to start doing statistics. That's every one in two people, but even more to an even greater extent than that.
Yeah, it's like
So,
2 and 3 or three and
yeah,
four, something like
so it's
that.
just been normalized, and these petroleum-based drugs, obviously, that have a massive industry, they're becoming normalized too. It makes me wonder, like as they come out with things like Neuralink and all of that, is that going to be the new standard of care? Is obviously intertwining our human nature with technology to support these health issues that seemingly won't go away. Is that going to be the standard of care in the future? I hope not. So it leaves us with two of these options. We don't know what the future is going to look like in terms of that. So you can either return to nature and start doing things the way God intended it to, or you can hop into the other direction and leave your future up to chance, basically.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And you mentioned God, and I kind of wanted to uh, bring that up too, because
Yeah.
I know you're a very religious, spiritual
Yeah.
man, and I wanted to hear more about how your religion plays a role in your health, in your lifestyle, in everything that you do.
Yeah, so I'm Christian. I'm more like non-denominational, I would say, but I do have a very strong alignment with Orthodox Christian. Um, but yeah, I was baptized Orthodox Christian, and then I grew up Catholic. I never really had a relationship with God. I wasn't like it wasn't really aware to me that that was an aspect of it. I just kind of thought like I'm going through the motions. If I'm a good person, that's really all I need. I'm trying my best, basically, and just following rules. And it was a little bit off-putting to me, the rule aspect of things. And I just didn't really understand. And I think that my lack of understanding is what made the rules and all that seem so intimidating to me. So all of college, I really neglected my faith, and yeah, I was not a practicing Christian whatsoever. And this really changed when I actually did a psychedelic trip. I did 5 grams of psilocybin, and up to that point, I really had no spiritual influence. Did a lot of drugs, did a lot of alcohol, a lot of really bad things that I'm not proud of. And when I did the psilocybin, it actually really connected me with God again. So I started making efforts in my faith again. And actually, when I started doing this, I started having pretty chilling demonic nightmares in the evening. And out of the blue, it just happened out of nowhere. Like, that hadn't happened to me since I was a young kid. So that happened for a while, and it kind of made me seek God even more. And it was a really good experience overall because it brought me so much closer to God. And then I had a little incident a bit later on, and I ended up having to withdraw from an opioid like substance. It was a very difficult time in my life. I didn't know if I was ever going to get off of it, and it was very scary in general. So I really needed something greater than myself to depend on in this instance. And all of a sudden, one day, after being like 8 months addicted, I cried out to God, and all of a sudden, I got the urge to quit it. And I ended up quitting it. I didn't sleep for 10 days straight. All I did was read the Bible, and all I did was pray basically for those 10 days. And even though I was in the worst physical pain of my life, it felt like I was in heaven. It felt like I was experiencing so much joy just from that experience, from being filled with the Spirit of the living God and actually speaking to Him and getting to see the changes that he was already making within me. So it was a very powerful experience overall. And now I kind of run every single aspect off of my life based on God and based on my actual faith. And now that I have faith, I just constantly am sitting there with hope for a better future, no matter what it is that I experience. And when you have that, it's very easy to function from a state of love and just want to give back to others all the time and want to kind of base your life around what can I do to help other people and lift other people up. And it just brings you to this entire different state of consciousness in life.
Man, I really love that. I love that entire story, man.
Yeah.
Especially the last part. I really felt, I really resonated with that last part. And
Yeah.
I just want to say I'm grateful for you for coming on and doing this
Oh,
podcast,
yeah,
man.
you
It's very
too, bro.
generous of with your
Yeah.
time, and thank you.
Bro, there is no other podcast that I want to come on right now. None other.
Well, that is very nice of you to say. I have one last question for you um, before we close things
Yeah.
out, and that's so we've talked a lot about different health aspects different things you do for your health to ensure that you're the most vibrant, vital version of yourself. But what are some things you see emerging in the next 5 to 10 years that people should pay attention to in the health space?
Depends. Are we talking mainstream health or are we talking our type of health?
What are the things that you see as most important that are going to be coming out in the health space that could potentially revolutionize or change things?
Yeah, I think that there's a growing divide, and it's becoming more and more apparent to me. It's team technology versus team nature, because inherently, as you make more tech products, you're going to experience more of those NNEMFs that can be quite harmful. And I believe that it's going to lead to increased dependence on the technology. So I'm of the party of I'm going to use the technology, but I'm also going to be in nature as much as I can and try to maintain that part of myself. So on one end of the spectrum, I think that we're going to see gigantic investments and gigantic steps forwards in terms of our technology and our ability to kind of help it health diagnostics, all that different type of stuff, and just be able to help people over time with that stuff, like Neuralink, all the chips, everything, all of that's going to grow. Maybe diagnostic imaging and medicine is going to grow, all that type of stuff. But I think we'll see more and more AI involvement as well in that. Now, on the other side, I think that we're going to see more technologies that are based around light. So certain brands like EMR Tech, Chroma, blockbluelight.com, they're all very adamant about kind of keeping our light spectrums to what they should be by nature, and they're really good at matching that. So we see different things like blue light blockers, red light panels, even UV panels nowadays. So we see a lot of those coming out, and it's really good to see people taking the initiative and making products saying, hey, we're going to fight back in this war, and we're going to bring a lot of things back to nature by making a lot of technology that can replicate that. So I think that over the next 5 years, we're going to see a massive divide in what people perceive to be healthy. And I think that a lot of it's going to be political based as well, because we have one party going into the office, the red party, the conservatives, and a lot of conservative people seem to be in favor of RFK and what he's doing. And then you look at the other more liberal side, and they're obviously in favor of the exact opposite of what RFK was doing. So I think we're going to see a divide in both politics, light, nature versus technology, all of that. And I would ask, as somebody watching this, you should be very mindful about this and do your research to see which side am I going to support? Am I going to use a platform at some point to get information out on this and kind of spread this to shift public perception eventually? Yeah, I think that that's all going to be really important in the coming years.
Wow, I definitely agree with what you're saying there. There's definitely two sides. There's the holistic side, and then there's the mainstream side, and you could kind of see who's falling into what camp as far as that goes.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
that we just need more discussions where both of the sides don't absolutely hate each other. We just need more unbiased discussions, because we don't want there to be two sides. Ideally, it should be minor disagreements amongst one unified group of people that have the common goal of getting people to be healthier. None of this like financial motivation, none of this grifting, like none of that garbage. What we really need is unity amongst the people because it's mankind versus mankind at this point, and we should all be wanting for each other to get healthier, and we should all be expressing love towards each other rather than hatred over disagreements.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think the problem is social media because it tends to propagate the most extreme voices on either side, and that's what gets shown to people, and then people will take that and be like, this is what they think. When it's not, generally there's gradations in between,
Yeah,
and it prevents conversation.
yeah, I 100% agree with that.
Well, Chris, Mito Poppy, thank you so much for coming on this show. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you, maybe get coaching from you, or just follow you on social media? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I currently do a lot of health consulting, and yeah, it's been going very well. It's probably my favorite part of my job, just getting to work with people, see them get healthier. But I also have a school community plus course that I'm launching with a business partner of mine in January. So you'll definitely want to be on the lookout for that. If you want to message me about any consults, any health questions in general, any of that stuff, my Twitter handle is MitoPapi, MitoPapi. And then my Instagram handle is just the MitoPapi, same spelling.
Great. Thank you so much for coming on, Chris. And
Yeah, of
this
course.
was a great conversation, and I look forward to more in the future.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for having me on.
Beautiful.
Bro, that went very well.